Good afternoon. As you can see, I still remain without a haircut. I need a haircut. My hair is so long. Maybe, I think we're going to do that tomorrow, actually. My kids need haircuts. And we're all going to ditch school tomorrow for my youngest son's birthday. And I think part of our plan is to get fresh. get cleaned up. But yeah, hey, happy Thursday to you guys. My Thursday's been pretty good, not very eventful. One fun thing I did do today was I took part of the morning and went to my kid's school to read to him for his birthday. It's just something his school does. He gets to invite a guest. It can be anybody that he wants to invite. And I got the honor of being that guest. His brother also got to come down and read with us. So actually it was me and his brother that got to be the honored guest. But that was a lot of fun. Other than that, yeah, chill Thursday. Got some coffee, double shot of espresso. This is like the only type of shot that I've ever drank in my entire life. I'm not a drinker. Literally never have drank in my life. Just, it's never interested me. Okay, let's see. So yesterday we spent way too long fiddling with how to debug JavaScript in the browser using Neovim. And I've got something to tell you. I did eventually figure it out. So after 2.5 hours on stream trying to figure it out, and I couldn't, I got kind of obsessed with it. And like 4 or 5 hours later, just before I took my kid to basketball practice, I figured out the solution. So last night I stayed up way too late and made a video. It's on my YouTube channel that basically walks you through the necessary pieces of my config that make it work, and then it gives some demos. So if you want to go check that out, it is on my channel. What did I call it? I think I called it How to Debug Vue, React, and JavaScript in the Browser Using Neovim. But yeah, you can go check that out, or you can just go look at my config files. Those are also up on my GitHub. But just to show you, because I was pretty proud of it when I figured it out, because I could not find anything. I could not find anything online that basically trued up. There was a lot of information online in the last 2 years or so around this topic, but things had changed with the VS Code debugger and basically made a lot of that information, a lot of the existing configurations not really useful. But anyways, let's go in here. Well, first thing we need to do is we need to, let's open Neovim. I always forget you can run the terminal in Neovim. So we'll do this. Let's do a vertical split. In this one, let's call the terminal command. Let's insert here, clear that, and we're going to say npm run dev. So obviously, just like with any, kind of development workflow, you're probably going to have a dev server running, and then you're going to be making changes. And so you're going to basically launch, for front-end code, you're going to launch your app in a browser that allows you to debug it, but all the debugging happens in your IDE, not using the browser debugger, which is still always an option, but it's kind of nice to be able to debug things in your editor. So let's get out of insert mode here. Let's go back to our directory, and let's go to the hello world component. And so what we'll do is we'll come down here to the button. No, we'll go to the increment function. We'll set a breakpoint here, and then we'll push leader DC, and it's going to show the configurations that I can use to debug this. And in this case, I just want to launch Edge. One thing I do have to provide, because I'm not using a launch.json file, like a VS Code launch.json file, is I have to tell it what URL to launch. So in this case, I want to launch 5173, because that's the port that my app's running on. that should open a browser, which it did, but you can't see it, right? So it opens it here. Now if I click the count button, we get our breakpoint hit over here. And I demoed this in that video, but I just thought if you were here yesterday and I was deeply in the struggle bus to figure out how to do this, I figured it out, and it was very exciting. So I'm hoping that my configuration, which you can find it at, if you're interested in it, you can find it. Hold on, let me make this a little bigger. W play. Stop that. I'm hoping that my configuration, but it is on my GitHub. Reborn. I think it's in Vim config. I know a lot of people have like a repo that's like all their dot files. I have not reached that level of organization yet, so I just pushed up my config into a single repo. But the interesting bits that allow this to happen are in the plugins directory, in the debugging file, and most interestingly, it is that big enough. It is this piece of configuration right here, these adapters. So basically what you do is you loop over and you register basically an identical configuration for PWA Node, PWA Chrome, and PWA MS Edge. And then the piece that makes it, which will work, but then to make it a little bit more compatible with how VS Code's launch.json files are generated now, which most of them don't have that PWA prefix now. They're using just Node or Chrome or MS Edge. We have this additional piece of logic here that basically just does a little sleight of hand and says, if you're looking for the adapter type Chrome, well, that's fine. We have an adapter to it, but that adapter is actually a function. And what that function does is it basically says, oh, you're looking for the Chrome adapter? Okay, well, we're actually going to use the PWA adapter, and it just swaps them and it basically forces you to use that PWA configuration that I registered up here. So, but that's really the piece of the puzzle that makes it work. That should cover a lot of your launch.json functionality. And obviously, if you want to put specific configurations, you can down here. I put some configurations for Node. I put one in here for like TypeScript using TS Node. And then I put the Chrome and the Edge configurations in there too. So I don't know. Maybe you find that helpful. I felt like I wanted to share that with you guys since yesterday we were deep in that rabbit hole. Today, though, we're going to get back to that project that we had worked on a little bit earlier this week. And we had my main focus when I was streaming the last week or so, and that's this alt text generator. So let's go in here, cd alt text, and we had actually gotten pretty far with this, although now I kind of don't remember where we were, so I'm going to have to kind of orient ourselves again. Basically, I think we had gotten to the point where we had what was it? We basically had gotten to the point where we were able to make requests to Gemini, but our requests were failing because we weren't giving a valid API key. So let's hold on. Yeah, it's this one. So basically, we got to this point where we can call a valid request, but because our provider key is just this fake stubbed out value, it doesn't actually work. So like, let's just run this really quick. Well, let's actually set a breakpoint first. Hold on. So let's go to program CS. Let's set a breakpoint in here. So this is where we're just making our response with our image. So let's set a breakpoint right here, and then go back to our test file and run this real quick. So we'll say leader TD, which will debug the nearest test, or should debug the nearest test. This usually takes a minute the first time to get the debugging working. We should hit a breakpoint. There we go. Okay. You can see this is the key we sent, right? This is our fake key. And then if we look at the response content, we should see API key not valid. So what we need to do, we basically need to do two things now from a test perspective. And we make another one. Yeah, because I have multiple test cases. Okay, so we basically need to do two things, right? So this is an integration test. When I think of integration test, I think of we're going to try to test every bit of code that we have control of and how it works together. Which typically means that things that are third parties, like the Gemini service, are going to be stubbed out, mocked out, whatever term you want to use, but basically they're going to be fake. We're not actually going to make a request to Gemini. We're going to fake that, right? So in this case, for this integration test, I would want to assume that, hey, we're testing the happy path here. And we're saying, hey, when we give the required parameters to our endpoint should respond with good information, and we're going to assume that Gemini responds properly. We don't really have control over the Gemini service, so we sort of have to, in our integration test, say, okay, under this specific test scenario, we're going to dictate that Gemini responds successfully. We could also dictate that Gemini responds unsuccessfully, and we could integration test that as well. Now you may be saying, okay, so how do I do that, right? Because if we go back to our code, over here, you can see we're making a call with the HTTP client. So how do we basically stub out the request, or intercept the request, or mock the request somehow? And this is something that I just found from writing tests for my projects like this. The easiest thing I found to do is use this library called mock HTTP. It's by a guy named Richard Saleh. And it's basically like a testing layer for the HTTP client that allows you to either replace an HTTP client with a mocked one, or even replace a message handler with a mocked one. So you can see, like, you can actually, you're going to mock on the message handler, but then you can also translate that mocked message handler to an HTTP client, and then you can pass that in, and you can inject that into your application code if you want. And you can do, it's got really good ergonomics. Like, you can, there's an example test here, right? So you can do, when you say when, and then you match on a particular URL, right? And then you can also say respond with this type of content, right? And you can actually give data. So it's really nice, really handy library that I found is kind of my go-to when I'm working with services. And then again, this is in the context of like unit testing or integration testing, where the idea is you're really just focused on your application code, the stuff that you can guarantee and control and own. And then we're kind of mocking out the rest, as opposed to something like an end-to-end test, which is much more probably akin to like a smoke test, where you're probably not going to have a lot of those end-to-end tests, but in those end-to-end tests, you are going to actually make a real request to Gemini. So today, let's do two things. Let's get the integration tests set up so that our calls to Gemini are mocked. And then let's set up an end-to-end test where we actually pass in an actual valid API key, and we're going to do that through an app settings file, so it's not checked into source code, and we don't have to concern ourselves with leaking that secret. but it'll still be able to be injected into our app at runtime, just like it will be when it's deployed. Well, I guess I shouldn't say when it's deployed, because when it's deployed, someone else is going to pass in that API key. So we're just going to want some way in our end-to-end test to be able to read in an API key from some place not in our source code, and then pass that in as part of our test. And we can work that out once we get to it. So let's start with this first here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to install this in our test project. So I think if it works, let's see, we're going to do space ni, and then we're going to say search for this, and we're going to install that, and we get an error, which is wonderful. I haven't had good luck with this NuGet library, honestly. Yeah, see, and now it's broken. I don't know. Maybe I need to pull that plugin out of my config, because I really haven't had a lot of success with it using it to install packages. So let's make this a little bigger. Disable reline. Let's go back to alt-gen. Change it to source. Then we'll go right into our tests, and we'll say .NET add package. Now we should have it over here. Yep, you can see it's been added. Added right there. What are we going to do next? So now we need to actually use it, right? So if we go into our test files, right? So where's the HTTP client at? So the HTTP client is coming from, in our application code, it's coming from in program CS. It's being injected into this alt text provider. I think what I want to do, and the way it gets injected is because in my program CS, I've registered this add HTTP client method, which doesn't add an HTTP client instance. What it adds is it adds a HTTP client factory, and that factory handles the instantiation and creation of HTTP clients for us. We don't have to do that manually ourselves. But one thing we can do is we can actually add what do we want to call it? Strongly typed HTTP clients. So what we can do is we can actually come down, and the reason I want to do this is because it makes writing tests and configuring mocks for HTTP clients against specific instances of HTTP clients easier. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So let's come down here to the alt text provider factory. And just before we get to, well, actually, let's do it after the alt text provider. Also, we can get rid of this comment because we do not need it anymore. So we're going to come down below this method, and we are going to make a new class. This class is going to be called Gemini. Oh, no, we need an interface first, don't we? Interface is going to be Gemini service. Well, actually, do I need to do that? Actually, I think what I can do, let's see if this will work. So basically what I want to do is I want to register an HTTP client using some strong types. But I already have a provider here, and I have a alt text. Well, no, but I don't want to use it for every provider. But I do need to factor this into a service. Yeah, how do I want to do this? I think I do want a service. I think I want an interface, and I'm going to call this Gemini service, like this. And I don't know. I think that's what I'm gonna do. Is I'm gonna have a service, and it's gonna be responsible for actually generating that text, like that. And then I'll have another interface. I have a class that's called Gemini service. Although this is going to implement Gemini service, and this is also going to be capital I. And down here, let's see if Copilot can do this for us. We basically just want to move all that logic from up there into this. How did it do? Where do we go with our? Yeah, so we basically want to take all of this. Shift V. No. Yeah, Shift D. We're going to take all of this and we're going to say yank or delete. Yeah, delete. We're going to bring this down below this guy and put that there. We're going to format it. We're going to pass this in. Client. Okay. We'll come up here and we'll just yank this stuff all from this stuff right here. Delete it. Move it into our service. Where did my service go? Did I just delete my service? Or what? No, it's right here. We need a task. Public async task of string. Generate content sync. String provider key string name type memory string image. And then now this is where we want to put all that code we just copied. So fix the formatting. This should all be fine now. We're basically doing the same exact logic. It's unused. Why is it unused? Oh, because we need to move these things. Yeah, we need to yeet these. We need to delete that. Need to delete this guy. I don't think this is used anywhere. No, that goes to the what? Hold on. I'm lost where I'm at here. This guy should just be like that now. There's one extra curly brace in here. Can't have too many curly braces. Okay, so then basically what I gained by doing that, right, is so now instead of passing in the HTTP client, what I can pass in here is I can pass in the Gemini service, which is basically a strongly typed HTTP client. That's basically what we did. And you'll see what I mean by that. Or a name. You could also say it's a named, you know, you could also do this with a name. You could use a named HTTP client. And then here we'll just return that. And actually, I don't even think we have to wait it, do we? We can just say return that. That should all work the same. But now what the benefit of that is, now I can come up here, right? And instead of saying add HTTP client, what I can do is I can say add, and I can declare interface and an instance implementation. So I can say Gemini service is or it's Gemini service. And so that, and you can even do more configuration off the end of this, right? So maybe if you wanted to configure a specific base URL or something like that, you could do that here too. But what that should allow me to do now, though, more importantly, is in my test code, going back to what we were originally trying to do, is now I should be able to register a mock HTTP client for resolving that Gemini service specifically. Or I can actually declare a handler, a primary handler. So let me go into my test file just to connect the dots for you where I'm going with this. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure that when we call the generate method, that when in my application code, I'm basically trying to get to the point where I can dictate when this client right here makes this post, I want to be able to dictate, hey, when you see this request URI, I actually want you to respond with this response, right? I want you to intercept that and mock out the response. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to go into my app factory, and if you may have not been here when we set up the app factory, but the app factory is really kind of it's the thing that lets us do all this cool integration testing in .NET. It allows us to bootstrap up our whole entire API into memory, and not only can we run real requests against it in memory, but we can also do all kinds of cool configuration, and we can override services and do configuration that's specific to our tests. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call something called builder.configure test services. And that's going to take a lambda. And I think this also needs a namespace. And then down here, what I want to do is I want to call add HTTP client, but I want to use those same types that I called in my application code, just like GitHub Copilot suggesting here. And I think I need to add a using for this too. I can move those to my globals here. Actually, let's just do that right now. I know there's probably people that have seen some of the code I wrote and been like, man, he really abuses that global using functionality feature, but I don't know, I prefer it. I know some people say like, yeah, but isn't it nice to be able to look at the top of a file and understand what's using what? And I'm not going to argue with that. I just never particularly read code that way myself. Like I tend to not really pay a ton of attention to the usings. And if I need to dig into it, I will. Like I'll just shift K to try to find what namespace it's coming from. That's just me. I mean, everyone has their things, and when I'm working on my own projects, this is one of those things I like to do. Okay, so let's go back to the app factory. And so now that I have this registered, what I can do here is I can chain off an extra piece of configuration. So you remember me saying, hey, you can configure additional stuff about that client. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say configure primary HTTP message handler. And this is going to take a lambda that produces that handler. So right now, I'll just say new at the moment. right? Oh, it's an abstract. Okay, so I'll leave that like that for the moment. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use that library we just installed. So I'm going to add a property up here, and it's gonna be public because I need to have access to it in my tests, right? So this is gonna be a mock HTTP message handler. And this comes from that library that we installed. And we'll call this mock HTTP message handler, and it's just going to be a new instance. Every time we new up a class of this application factory, we want a new instance of this to be initialized and set as that property. And we only want a getter because we don't want to be able to change it outside of the initialization. So using, yep, that's our using we need. Okay, and then you may have already guessed where we're going with this. Now down here in our configure primary HTTP message handler, instead of returning a new HTTP message handler every time, we're going to return the one that we're exposing as a public property. And this really wants us to use a lambda, so we'll make it happy. Do that. We'll add a little bit of formatting. I feel like this reads better myself. Put my parentheses on separate lines. Actually, I'd probably actually put this one up here. Do this. I don't know. I go back and forth between this and putting them on their own, putting it on its own line. In any event, what we've done now is whenever this Gemini service resolves the HTTP client that's injected into it, it's going to resolve it, and it's going to use our mock message handler as its primary handler. So what this means is we should be able to go back to our tests, right? Quit. No, I just want to write out. Now we should be able to go back to our tests, and we should be able to say, let's see, we have a factory, we have a reference to the factory. Do we have a reference to the factory? Okay, so that's one thing I need to do. I need to go add a factory. I need to go expose the factory. So if we go to my integration test, this is my base class. I'm only exposing the client. I also need to expose the app factory because that's going to have that mock handler on it. So then let's go back to our generate endpoint. Now we should be able to say factory, mock message handler, and then we can say when, right? So let me return this down to a new line. When it's a post, HTTP method is a post, and it matches some specific URI, we can respond, and let's just respond with a bad status code for now. No, not method, status code. Let's just respond with like bad gateway, something super not like good. And then what do we want to do now? So now we actually want to test if this works, but this isn't going to work because it's never going to match our request. So what we need to do is we need to go back to our application code, and we need to go up and find our base URL, or at least the URL we're planning to hit. So we'll just grab, what did I just do? I jumped myself, there you go. We're still figuring out the Neovim stuff, you know? Oh man, someone's spamming in my chat. Piercing masochist. How do you like block someone? Yeah, I can ban you. I banned you. I dropped the ban hammer. What a name. Piercing masochist. Although now my chat window's like kind of lagged out. Oh, there we go. Okay. Am I overexposed now too? It seems like the light. Does it look okay? I can't tell. I might need to turn down my exposure, but I think we're okay right now. Okay, so what were we doing? Oh, we were grabbing this URL before I had to drop the ban hammer on piercing masochist. Dude, the internet's a weird place. We're gonna copy this. We're gonna go back to our test code, and we are gonna paste that in. Whoop! We're gonna paste that guy in here. Paste that guy in. Why is it? I must have copied one of the quotes. Okay. So what this means is now, anytime this handler sees a request being made by the client that has this request URI, this handler should take over and intercept it and rewrite it and respond with what we've dictated here. So let's go ahead and try that. Now when we run this, we should get every one of our responses should respond bad gateway. And it didn't. It responded internal server error. So why did it respond? Well, let's see. Let's base td. Let me debug this. I'm sure I forgot something. I saw some. Hold on. Let me set a breakpoint down here. Space td. If you see what I've done wrong, let me know. Oh, it didn't match anything. That's why. That's what this is saying down here. I don't know if you guys can see that. It says failed to match request for post generative language. Okay, so then continue. Let's set a breakpoint in our program code or app code and see if we actually make it here. What's our request URI? Oh, I wonder if I need to actually specify. Oh, yeah, because we're building the URI dynamically, so that's just the base. So we need to actually specify, I think, the rest of it. Okay, so request URI. Let's come into the REPL. We'll say request URI, and then we'll go up, shift that, yank it, continue, stop the debugger, go back to our endpoint test, and now what we want to actually do is we want to put this in here. And obviously you could come up with, you could come up with ways, right, to figure out what's the best way to actually get the request you want to match, or the URI you want to match, right? It doesn't have to be some sort of hard-coded long string like I'm doing here. But just to kind of accomplish what we set out to do. we can remove this. That's a query string. We don't need to match on that. And I don't think we need to match on the trailing slash either. Could be wrong. Okay, let's write that out. Now let's I added some stuff for breakpoints. Yeah, clear. No, not list. Debug, breakpoint, C. Yeah, just want to clear them all. So now I would expect bad gateway responses. One backend definitions were evaluated. Is it? I guess it's also expecting me to match the query. Hold on. Let me look at this library real quick. Documentation. Oh yeah, I can do a wildcard. They've got all these different. Like you can say with query string, with exact query string. They've got all. You can match on the content. You can do all kinds of things to kind of like narrow in on what request. You can even pass in like a lambda. So let's go and update that. So now we should be able to say now the thing I should note here is so what are we gonna do here? So no, I think I just want to say, well, I guess I mean I guess it doesn't hurt for me to match the whole thing, does it? So space td. Oh, whoops, hold on. I didn't write that out, did I? It's still not going to work. I always forget to do that. I bet people watch my streams and they're like, man, this guy spent 40 minutes writing tests. See, failed. URL matches. Why doesn't the URL match? Because of the trailing slash. That's gonna really annoy me if that's the. It is an exact match. I mean, I can use that wildcard character, right? So like, that's not, it's a skill issue on my part. Yep, and that's good. And this will actually be, these responses are from my API. So these will actually be 500s because I'm generating an exception. But if we put a breakpoint in here, if we put a breakpoint here, that response code I would expect to be the bad gateway that I am mocking. Yeah, so where's our response code? Here, response, status code, and you can, I don't know if you guys can see that. Can you, oh no, it's behind my head. How can I show that to you? You can see status code here. Oh, is it still behind my head? There. Status code for this response is bad gateway. And so that's my mock message handler intercepting that recall and handling it. Okay, so let's put this back to the way it was. I might want to consider moving all this information to the left side of my screen, shouldn't I? If my head's going to be on the right side. I guess it's something to worry about for another day. Okay, so yeah, so that's how I typically approach handling these types of cases where you want to write an integration test like this, but you don't want the integration test to actually always be making a live request off. Now, the one thing you have to keep in mind is this mock message handler, when you build these definitions, those definitions are going to remain in the handler's definitions, right? So it's going to be checking against these definitions. So if you're running multiple scenarios or multiple tests, right? Especially in the case of XUnit, where a lot of things run in parallel, calling these handler methods and adding definitions to these handlers can screw up other tests. And so, like, we can actually, I think we can actually simulate this. So let's say we're going to say okay. We're not going to respond with any let's just say it's responding with that. We have a missing curly brace here. Is that what's happening? Do we have one too many, maybe? Let's just respond with an empty object for now, because I don't really care about the specifics of the content at the moment, but I will at some point. Well, yeah, it does. It takes two. Well, let's look at the documentation, I guess. Well, it has a lot of overloads. GI. So I can give it a delegate. The only handler. Okay. Let's see, right? No, close. Or actually, find buffer. Let's just respond with in this case. We don't need all that. We don't need all that. This will also be a strong type that we can just create and serialize. So we'll say that. What we're going to do, so this I think will actually make all these tests pass. So space tr. Yeah, so that'll pass all that tests, all those test code, because we're just looking for a successful response, and we're not asserting on the alt text at the moment. We don't really care what it is. This is where we want to say, this is where I want to show you basically how these definitions can screw you up. So let's say we come up here, because now we need to do this. We have to mock out this handler on each of our tests now, because in our in our app factory, we're using this mock handler to fulfill the request and not make a live request. So we'll say factory. Oh, actually, I don't think I have to mock this here because we'll never make it there because the request is invalid. But let me add another test. Fact, public, async, task, show issue. Which is that's what I'm trying to do. I'm basically trying to show you an issue that you can run into when you're using this. And let's not do that. We still want to post. We want to post that content. But it needs to be a valid file. So we'll just change it to JPEG. And then up here, what we're going to do is we're basically going to do the same mock. So we'll say factory dot like that. But instead of responding with an OK, we want to respond with a bad request. Well, not. We want to respond with HTTP status code. Like that. We don't even need to respond with a body. We can just respond with it. Now, what should happen, though, is when I run these tests, one of them should fail, because now we have two of these mock handler definitions that essentially are going to try to fulfill for each other, right? And now we're trying to respond with two different things, but we're matching against the same exact request. So if I come down here, I should expect that my response should have not bad requests, it should have just a server error because we weren't able to generate the alt code. So let's run this in isolation. So space tr, just this test all by itself. And I would guess if I run this all by itself, it's going to pass. If it actually runs, is it? Maybe I didn't hit the right cut. I think it's running. I think my symbols are off here. So let me try to run this one now. Space tr. Let me open this test summary. How do I do that? Control T. Yeah. Okay. Oh, we need to refresh. Neo test. Hold on, let me quit all this, right? Quit all. Open it back up. Oh God, what's happening? Well, it was not playing nice over there, was it? Let's see, let's go home. Generate endpoint test. Control T. Control T. And I'm hoping it's going to discover this fact. This fact test. My hour's almost up. Okay, there we go. Now I found both my tests. So if I mark this one, and I say TS space TS, I'm running the show issue test. That passes, okay. So then we're gonna come up here and we're gonna run this one, space TR. That runs that guy. Cool. But I think if we run now, if I put this demo together the right way, these should fail when I run them at the same time. So let's mark both those in space TSR. One of them, I'm expecting one of them to fail. Okay, never mind. I guess neither of them fail. I guess why does one fail and one doesn't? I wonder if I run, maybe it's if I run the file. It could be just how XUnit maybe executes things. So space TF. Yeah, there we go. So the idea here is basically that because at factory is a fixture, it's going to be used across all the context of all the tests in my test class. And so I'm basically generating definitions on this message handler, which is a property on my class fixture. And so these definitions are accumulating. And so if I obviously run them individually, and I think that must be what this plugin's doing, is when I mark these, it's just running each of those tests by itself. But if I try to run the whole file so that everything's running at the same time, this ends up succeeding, I think. This ends up actually succeeding. If we look at the error message, we get an OK. And we get an OK because this handler is actually the handler that's fulfilling the call out to Gemini for this test. So the way we fix that, this was all to say, hey, the way we fix that is what we need to do is we actually need to define a constructor for our test class. We can't use a primary constructor. We need to come down here and define a class constructor, and I'm going to put it up here above my method. And so now our method needs to look like this, or our constructor needs to look like this, how Copilot says it looks, but that's not the right fixture. It should be app factory. And then we're going to add body here. And what this body is going to do is it's going to take care of cleaning up all those definitions. So on that mock handler, we can call clear. Now, we do leader GF to fix, whoops, we do leader, no. Yeah, leader GF to fix our formatting. And then if we try to run our test file again, it's going to make me a liar, but what it should do is now before each of these tests run, that constructor should run and it should clear the handler, which it doesn't look like it did. Is it clear? Did I call clear? Or is it... Maybe I'm using the wrong... Reset. Clears any mocked request configured with Win. Oh, maybe that's the one I want. What does clear do? Okay. Clears all mocked requests configured with either expect or win. Oh, so this one, is this one just isolated to... Oh, you know what? Actually, I know what I did. Did not write that out. Clear should work, but I don't think I wrote it out. I don't think I wrote it out. So space F. There we go. So now, yeah, so they're being reset now. Those definitions on our mock handler are being reset before each test runs. And so now when our test is adding definitions to that mock handler, those definitions aren't then impacting other tests that are being run by XUnit. And obviously, you could fix this in probably other ways. Like you could narrow down the matching that you're using, right? So you could like look, you could match the request being made specific to that test. But this is just kind of the approach I like to take, because then I don't have to think about that stuff as much. I just say, hey, here's the URI you need to match. Here's what you need to respond with. Okay. And now I think what we'd want to do is, I'm out of time. I got a meeting in 10 minutes. I'm out of time. But now what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to respond with some stubbed in alt text, basically a stubbed in response from Gemini. And I actually had one prepared. I'll show you. I prepared for this. I actually have been trying to. This is an example response I got back from I was just doing some exploration in Postman. And so now what I should be able to do is I should be able to, maybe I can read this in, maybe a condensed version of this or something. I can read this in and then make this respond back with that content. And then I can assert on it basically. The other thing I wanted to do, which we didn't get to, was now I want to actually write an end-to-end test, right? So this out obviously works really nicely for doing the integration stuff, but we still want to have probably an actual smoke test that says, hey, yes, when we actually call out to Gemini with a valid API key, this all works. And so what we need to do is we actually need to add a new type of test. So let's just do that right now. I only have 10 minutes, but let's add that really quick. I usually I've seen people take different approaches to like how they organize their test files. What I've gone to recently in smaller projects like this is to just have a singular test project and then namespace the test files within that test project. So I've seen people have separate projects for like, they have a project for unit tests, they have a project for integration tests, they have a project for end-to-end tests. And I've just recently, especially with API project like this, I've just gone to one test project and then I namespace, hey, these are integration tests, these are unit tests, these are end-to-end tests. If you're doing maybe you have a larger project, maybe a lot more tests or something going on, maybe it makes sense to separate those out into separate projects, but lately I haven't been doing that. So end to end, and then that's oh yeah, I want to delete that because I created it wrong. No, I don't want to delete that. I don't want to delete that directory. I want to add a new directory to this called end-to-end .cs directory. And then in here, I'll have a base class just like I have in my integration folder. And this integration will have a lot of the same stuff. So I can actually I actually probably need to pull out this app factory into something like fixtures or something, because my end-to-end tests are going to use it too. But this end-to-end test is basically going to look very similar to the integration test, only in this end-to-end test, I'm not going to worry about doing any kind of overriding of third-party services or anything like that. I'm just going to let the app run as it would and make real live calls out to those external services. So we'll do that next time. But I thought this was fairly productive. I know my development flow probably seems slow to a lot of people. I feel like it's a little slow to me, but I think it's probably slower on stream because I'm trying to talk a lot. I'm trying to talk through what I'm writing, and I'm also trying to explain what I'm doing and how to do it. And so I hope it's all right with you guys that I'm kind of slow. I don't accomplish much. And I'm sure I'll get faster as I do this more. Okay, write all that out and quit. We need to delete our remove Shada. I don't know why I have to do this every so often, but for whatever reason, there's some sort of temp file that gets created, and then I can't write to it when I'm closing and opening Neovim. So if you know anything about that, let me know. Maybe it's something with my configuration that's the problem. Oh man, now I'm really overexposed, aren't I? That's a little better. I had turned up my ISO manually because it was dark in here with the weather outside, and I just spent probably part of that time very shiny. Probably have a very shiny face. Yeah, okay. I've got a meeting I got to run to. Hope you guys are having a good Thursday. I hope you're enjoying some of this content, some of the time I've spent streaming. I don't really have anybody in the chat, so it could be I'm just talking to nobody. Irregardless, I'm having a good time, and maybe other people will find their way here, and we can all have a good time together. All right, guys. I'll talk to you later.